Eli Whitlock's hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitant, as if the act of opening it might shatter some fragile boundary between the past and the present. He had inherited the lodge only a week ago, a sprawling timber-framed building at the edge of Red River Valley, left to him by his late uncle, a man Eli barely remembered. A man with secrets whispered about but never shared. The storm outside rattled the shutters, and the wind carried the faint, sharp tang of ozone, a promise of rain and unrest. When the door creaked open, Eli froze. In the dim glow of a swinging oil lamp stood a young woman barefoot, her long dark hair tangled and damp, clinging to her narrow shoulders. Her eyes, fierce and unblinking, pinned him in place. He had seen determined looks before, but none like this. It was a gaze that dared the world to challenge her, a gaze that promised she would not be ignored. You shouldn't be here," Eli managed, his voice tighter than he intended. His hand drifted instinctively toward his revolver, though. It felt suddenly inadequate. "I belong here," the woman replied, stepping forward. Her tone was neither soft nor pleading. It was a statement of fact, absolute and undeniable. "You belong to me now." Eli's eyes flicked to her bare feet, the thin fabric of her dress, the small knife strapped to her boot. She radiated a wild energy, like the wind before a storm. The lodge, with its creaking floors and walls lined with faded photographs, suddenly seemed smaller, almost confining in the presence of her intensity. The room smelled of aged pine, dust, and the faint smoke of old fires. But beneath that was something more, something almost electric, like the air before a lightning strike. Eli felt a shiver run down his spine. He had always considered himself practical, rational. But now, confronted with this stranger, he realized he had no idea what he was facing. "Who are you?" he asked, trying to reclaim authority. "Why are you here?" Her lips curved into a faint, almost mischievous smile, one that didn't reach her piercing eyes. "My name is Ayita," she said. "I've been waiting for you, Eli Whitlock." "You don't remember me." "Not yet, but the land you've inherited, the lodge itself, they called me here. And now they've called you." Eli frowned, confusion knotting his chest. He had come expecting solitude, maybe a quiet night to arrange the few belongings his uncle had left behind. He hadn't expected a stranger who spoke as if destiny had been plotting for decades. "Called me?" he repeated, his voice barely more than a whisper. "For what?" Ayita's gaze didn't waver. "To protect what is yours, what your uncle left for you to guard. The valley has debts, Eli, and tonight those debts demand payment." Outside, the wind howled through the surrounding pine trees, rattling the lodge's shutters and carrying the scent of wet earth and sage. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and threatening, as if echoing her words. Eli felt an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. Something about her, the intensity, the certainty, made him feel exposed, as though the world had suddenly grown larger, stranger, and far more dangerous. He studied her more carefully. The cut of her dress revealed scars along her forearms and ankles, marks that hinted at survival in a world harsher than the town's quiet streets. Her bare feet were steady on the uneven boards, her posture unwavering. She wasn't afraid, and that frightened him more than any gun could. "You don't understand," he said finally, trying to assert himself. "This lodge is mine, yes. But you will understand soon enough," Ayita interrupted, stepping closer, her eyes flashing with an almost supernatural certainty. The floorboards groaned under her weight, echoing in the quiet lodge. "The valley remembers everything, Eli. The land, the lodge, the river. They remember who is loyal and who is not. And you are already part of this story, whether you like it or not." Another flash of lightning lit the room, and Eli caught the momentary glint of something ancient and dangerous in her eyes. For a heartbeat, he felt as though the lodge itself was alive, watching, judging. He realized with a jolt that he was no longer alone, not just with Ayita, but with history, with secrets, with forces he could neither see nor fully comprehend. Storm outside intensified, rain hammering against the roof, wind whipping the trees into frantic motion. Eli's grip tightened on the doorknob. He knew, in that instant, that his life had shifted irreversibly. The quiet inheritance he had expected had become something else entirely, a meeting with destiny itself, in the form of a fierce, untamed girl who refused to be ignored. "You're sure about this?" he asked, his voice trembling. Ayita tilted. Her head, dark eyes locking onto his. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," she said. "Tonight, Eli, you belong to me now." The words hung in the air, heavy and electric, and Eli realized that he had a choice: to resist the storm already gathering, or to step into it, heart first, and face whatever awaited him in the shadows of the lodge. Eli followed Ayita out of the lodge, boots sinking into the wet earth as the storm began to ease. The night air smelled of damp pine, scorched wood from distant campfires, and the faint, sharp tang of something almost metallic like the memory of blood long shed. He glanced around, noticing the valley stretched beyond the lodge, vast and wild, bathed in the silver glow of moonlight breaking through storm clouds. Every tree, every shadow seemed alive, as if the land itself were watching him, judging him. Ayita led the way with a confidence that unsettled him. She moved with a precision and grace that spoke of years surviving in the wilderness, years he had never known existed beyond the quiet, sleepy towns of Red River Valley. Each step was deliberate, her eyes scanning the ridges and hollows like she could see things the eye could not detect. "The Apache knew this valley long before anyone settled here," she said, her voice quiet but firm, carrying over the soft patter of leftover rain on the leaves. "Every hill, every creek, every ridge holds a memory. Eli, the land itself whispers secrets to those who are ready to listen." He swallowed, feeling the weight of her words. "Secrets? What? What kind of secrets?" Ayita paused on a slope, overlooking a distant ridge, moonlight glinting off a circle of jagged stones at the base of an ancient oak. "An altar," she said, motioning toward the formation. "A place where promises were made and debts were settled. Your uncle, he knew this valley had more than just wood and soil. He knew its power, and that's why you inherited the lodge." Eli frowned, trying to process her words. "Power?" "Yes," she said, her voice sharper now, almost like the crack of a whip. "The valley has a memory, Eli. It remembers those who harm it and those who protect it. Those who settle here can either honor it or pay for their trespass with their lives." A low breeze rustled the leaves above, carrying with it the distant cry of a coyote and the faint scent of sage burned long ago. Eli shivered not from the cold, but from the intensity in her gaze. Her dark eyes seemed to pierce him, weighing the truth in him and measuring his worth. He realized then that Ayita was unlike anyone he had ever met. She wasn't just brave. She was part of the land, a living reflection of its spirit, fierce and untamed. "You speak as though the land itself can choose," he said cautiously. "That it demands things of people?" Ayita's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "It does," she said. "And tonight it's demanding justice." Her words sent a ripple of unease down his spine. For a moment, he saw the valley differently. The moonlight glinted off the creek, casting silvery reflections that danced across jagged stones. Shadows shifted unnaturally, forming shapes that seemed almost human. Was it just his imagination, or did the forest itself seem to bend and twist? As if aware of the two intruders stepping lightly across its floor, Eli took a deep breath. "Justice for what? My uncle?" Ayita's expression darkened, eyes narrowing. For what your uncle discovered. For what he promised to protect. The valley holds more than just land, Eli. There are things hidden here that men would kill to possess. And your uncle. He kept them safe until the end. Thunder rolled in the distance, a low growl that vibrated through the valley. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating a small cave at the base of the ridge. That cave, Ayita said, pointing, contains what your uncle protected. But others have started to come, drawn by greed and ignorance. If they find it first, her voice trailed off, leaving Eli to imagine the danger, the bloodshed, the destruction. A chill ran through him as he realized the stakes. This was more than land inheritance. This was a battle between history, greed, and survival. He swallowed hard. Then, what am I supposed to do? You're supposed to learn, Ayita said softly. Learn to see the valley as it sees itself. Learn to listen to the spirits that guard it. And most importantly, learn to fight for what is ours. Eli looked at her, this fierce, untamed girl who seemed to belong to the wind and the wilderness itself. He realized that everything he had known about his life, about Red River Valley, was changing. The lodge, the land. Even his own fate was tied to her and the valley's memory. The wind whispered again through the pines, carrying a warning, a promise, and a call to arms. Eli Whitlock, the quiet inheritor of a forgotten lodge, now felt the weight of destiny pressing down upon him. And with Ayita at his side, he knew there was no turning back. Eli had never felt so small and simultaneously so exposed. The moonlight cast long shadows over the ridge as Ayita led him to a flat clearing, where the scent of damp earth mingled with something sharper, more ancient sage and cedar smoke from a fire long extinguished. She knelt, producing a small leather pouch tied with frayed thongs. The sound of the leather rubbing against itself seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet valley, as if the forest held its breath. She untied the pouch, revealing a collection of small feathers, bones, and a fine crimson powder. Eli leaned in, curious but hesitant, the air thick with tension. What is this? He asked. Ayita's dark eyes held his, unwavering. The Apache left marks for those who were chosen, she said. You, Eli, bear one of them. Eli blinked, uncertain if he had heard correctly. Chosen? For what? His voice cracked slightly, betraying the fear he tried to mask. To protect. The land, Ayita replied, her voice calm but insistent. And to face those who would steal it, this valley. It remembers, Eli, and it never forgets. Every tree, every creek, every ridge holds a memory of those who came before and those who harmed it. You've inherited more than a lodge. You've inherited a responsibility. Her hands moved with surprising precision, dipping a feather into the crimson powder. She traced a symbol onto his forearm, the powder glowing faintly in the silver light of the moon. Eli flinched at the touch, a tingling sensation spreading from the mark across his skin. It felt alive, like fire beneath the surface, a warmth that carried both power and warning. The mark will guide you, Ayita said softly, brushing stray strands of damp hair from her face. It will warn you when danger approaches, when greed encroaches, and when the valley calls for your attention. But it is also a burden. It cannot be ignored. Once marked, you belong to the valley as much as it belongs to you. Eli stared at the glowing symbol on his arm. He wanted to pull away, to tell her he didn't understand, that he wasn't ready. But there was no denying the rush of energy flowing through him, the sense that something deep and ancient had stirred within. I don't know if I can do this, he admitted, his voice low, almost a whisper. Ayita placed her hand over his, steadying him. You can, she said. The land chose you for a reason, and your uncle, he knew you would rise to meet it. But you must listen. You must learn. And above all, you must trust the valley and yourself." Eli drew a deep breath, trying to steady the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The valley was alive in ways he had never imagined. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the distant howl of a wolf. It was as though the creatures of the forest themselves recognized the mark, acknowledging him as a guardian, a participant in a story older than the towns, older than the settlers, older than even the lodge itself. Ayita stood, brushing the crimson powder from her fingers, and looked out over the ridge. Her silhouette was framed by the moonlight, tall and commanding, radiating both danger and a strange beauty. "Tonight is only the beginning," she said, voice carrying through the still night. "There are those who would take what your uncle protected. They have already begun their search. The valley will fight, Eli, but so must you, if you fail." Her gaze hardened, and a shadow seemed to pass over her features. "If you fail, the valley will be lost and nothing will remain of what we protect." Eli clenched his fists, the glowing mark warming his skin, filling him with a sense of purpose he had never known. Fear still lurked in his chest, but beneath it was something stronger, determination, and the faint stirrings of respect and awe for the fierce girl who had thrust him into this destiny. "Then I won't fail," he said, his voice firmer than he expected. "I'll protect it, whatever it takes." Ayita's expression softened slightly, just enough for him to see the human beneath the warrior. "Good," she said, "because from this moment on, we fight together. The valley, the lodge, your uncle's legacy, it all rests in our hands. And Eli, you must understand something. Once marked, you are no longer just Eli Whitlock, the inheritor of a lodge. You are part of something larger, older, and far more dangerous. You belong to the valley now. And the valley belongs to you." Eli looked down at the glowing mark on his arm, feeling its pulse like a heartbeat of the land itself. He realized that his life had irrevocably changed. The quiet days of inheritance and solitude were gone. Ahead lay danger, mystery, and a bond with Ayita and the land that would define him and possibly destroy him if he faltered. Above, the moon hung low over Red River Valley, silver and watchful, as though witnessing the birth of a new guardian. And Eli Whitlock, once ordinary, now marked, felt the weight of the valley pressing upon his shoulders, alive and insistent, whispering its demand: protect it or lose everything. The valley lay under a fragile calm, the storm having passed but leaving the air thick with anticipation. Eli Whitlock and Ayita climbed the ridge behind the lodge, the earth slick with rain and the pine needles sticking to their boots. Every sound was amplified: the creak of branches underfoot, the distant drip of water from leaves, the low rustle of unseen animals. The valley seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something or someone to appear. Ayita crouched behind a cluster of jagged rocks, her sharp eyes scanning the distant tree line. Eli followed, trying to keep his breathing steady, but every nerve in his body screamed in alert. "Do you see them?" he whispered, pointing toward the shadows gathering below. "They've already crossed the creek," Ayita murmured, lips barely moving. "Men with guns, strangers. They don't belong here." Eli's stomach tightened. He had lived his life among settlers, farmers, and townsfolk. He had seen conflicts over land and cattle, but this was different. These men carried an air of cold calculation, their movements deliberate, their eyes scanning the valley as though expecting resistance. And Eli now realized they would take whatever they wanted, no matter the cost. Ayita adjusted her stance. Crouching lower, her body coiled like a spring. "Stay behind me," she whispered. "Watch and learn. You cannot fight what you do not understand." Eli's hand hovered near his revolver, fingers tense. He wanted to act, to protect the lodge, to confront these intruders. But he obeyed. Her. Watching her now, he understood that Ayita's knowledge of the valley and the land gave her an advantage far beyond anything he could manage with a gun. The intruders moved closer, shadows elongating across the wet ground under the moonlight. Eli noticed their rifles gleaming faintly, their boots leaving tracks in the mud. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to warn the lodge, but Ayita's calm presence held him in place. She was watching, calculating, anticipating. "Underestimated the valley," Ayita murmured. "And they don't know what's waiting for them." From the ridge, Eli could see its small, subtle disturbances in the forest. A branch snapped here, a shadow moved there. The valley itself seemed to be alive, sending warnings, guiding Ayita and him. Eli felt the tingling in his arm again, the faint pulse of the Apache mark, like a heartbeat syncing with the rhythm of the land. It was warning him, urging vigilance, and confirming that Ayita had been right. The valley was not theirs to take lightly. A sudden movement below drew Eli's eye. One of the intruders paused, looking toward the forest as if sensing the unseen eyes tracking them. Ayita's lips curved slightly. "Patience," she whispered. "The first strike must be precise." Minutes passed, each second stretching, filled with tension and unspoken threat. The intruders were nearing the ridge, oblivious to the trap forming above them. Eli's heart pounded in his chest, the mixture of fear and anticipation making him feel alive in a way he had never experienced. "Eli," Ayita said, voice low but firm, "when the time comes, do exactly as I do. Trust your instincts, but do not act rashly. One wrong move." She didn't finish the sentence, but Eli understood perfectly. The valley would be unforgiving. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the ridge and the forest below. For a brief moment, Eli could see Ayita's silhouette clearly, poised, strong, and commanding. Her hair whipped around her face in the wind, eyes sharp and unyielding. He felt a strange mixture of fear and admiration, realizing he had never encountered someone who could wield both strength and purpose so effortlessly. The intruders paused at the base of the ridge, murmuring among themselves. They were close enough now for Eli to see their faces, hard, determined, unyielding. But they were unaware of the eyes watching them from above, of the valley itself guarding its secrets. Ayita moved first. She disappeared from Eli's sight for a heartbeat, then reappeared along a different angle, positioning herself for the first strike. Eli gripped his revolver, pulse racing, the glow of his mark warming his arm as if lending him courage. "Remember what I taught you," Ayita whispered, eyes meeting his for a fleeting second. "The valley is ours to protect. Strike only when necessary." Eli nodded, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The shadows below were more than just men. They were a threat to everything his uncle had left behind, to the valley, and now to him. As the wind howled through the pines and the moonlight glimmered off wet leaves, Eli realized something vital. He could no longer remain a bystander. With Ayita leading and the valley itself guiding them, he would face the intruders, no matter the cost. Tonight, the quiet lodge at the edge of Red River Valley would become a battleground, and there would be no turning back. The first rays of dawn barely touched the valley when Eli and Ayita crested the ridge, their breaths visible in the cold morning air. The intruders had camped at the base, unaware that the valley itself had already begun its silent war against them. The forest was alive with subtle movement, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, the occasional flash of a shadow. Eli's pulse raced as he glanced at Ayita, whose eyes scanned the men below with an intensity that made the wind seem to bend around her. "They're moving toward the lodge," she whispered. "We can't let them reach it. Stay close, Eli." Eli nodded, gripping his revolver, the warmth of the glowing Apache mark on his arm giving him a surge of courage. Yet even with the mark and Ayita's guidance, he felt the gnawing anxiety of inexperience. He had never faced men who were willing to kill for greed, men who didn't care about the valley or its secrets. Then, without warning, a new presence joined them on the ridge. Eli turned, startled, to see a figure stepping out from the shadows of the trees. The man was imposing, muscular, shirtless, his long black hair flowing freely, adorned with tribal jewelry, bone necklaces, and leather armbands. His dark eyes were sharp, calculating, but filled with a calm intensity that radiated authority. Eli instinctively stepped back, unsure whether this newcomer was friend or foe. "This is Tayan," Ayita said softly, almost reverently, "a guardian of the valley. He watches over the land and protects those who belong to it." Tayan didn't speak immediately. He knelt briefly, tracing the ground with one hand, sensing something invisible in the earth. Then, with a swift movement, he pulled an arrow from his quiver, notched it, and fired with uncanny precision at a distant tree, sending a signal that echoed like thunder through the valley. The intruders flinched, looking around in alarm. Eli felt a jolt of awe and fear. This was not just a man. This was a force of nature, a protector whose presence changed the dynamics of the fight entirely. Ayita glanced at Eli, her expression calm but urgent. "Watch carefully, learn, strike only when necessary." The intruders began advancing toward the lodge, unaware of the invisible net closing around them. Tayan moved silently among the rocks and shadows, a predator in his element. Arrows whispered through the air, forcing men to take cover, panic spreading among their ranks. Eli raised his revolver, taking aim, but he hesitated. The first strike had already been made. He was part of something bigger now, something guided by skill, instinct, and the land itself. "Now," Ayita hissed, and Eli fired. His shot rang true, hitting a rifle strap on one of the intruders and sending it clattering to the ground. Panic erupted below as Tayan appeared behind a boulder, loosing another arrow that disarmed a man entirely. The valley itself seemed to join the fight, the wind whipping leaves into their eyes, roots and rocks tripping the intruders, shadows making them seem surrounded. Eli's fear shifted into adrenaline-fueled focus. He watched Ayita move like a shadow, silent and lethal, and Tayan like a force of the earth, unstoppable and commanding. Together they were unstoppable. The intruders tried to flee, but the ridge, the rocks, and the guardians above them left no escape. One of the men attempted to aim a rifle upward at Eli and Ayita. Tayan's arrow struck true, pinning the weapon to a tree before it could be fired. Another intruder tried to scramble up the ridge. Ayita's dagger found its mark, cutting the man off before he could reach safety. The chaos below was a mixture of panic, fear, and disarray. Eli felt the thrill and terror of the first battle. He had never imagined himself fighting like this, but the valley, Ayita, and now Tayan demanded courage, and it flowed through him like wildfire. When the last intruder ran, Eli, Ayita, and Tayan stood atop the ridge, surveying the aftermath. The men had fled, leaving the valley untouched, the lodge safe, and the secret of the land still protected. Tayan's eyes met Eli's, dark and unreadable, then softened slightly, acknowledging the young man's part in the fight. Ayita stepped close, resting a hand on Eli's shoulder. "This is only the beginning," she said. "The valley has more challenges ahead, and not all who come will be as easy to repel. But today, you have taken the first step. You are learning, and you are no longer alone." Eli looked at the Apache warrior, at Ayita, and at the valley that stretched endlessly below. For the first time, he felt the weight of his inheritance in full. Not just a lodge, not just a piece of land, but a legacy of protection, courage, and destiny. Above them, the rising sun glinted off wet pine needles, casting long golden shadows across the ridge. And Eli Whitlock understood this valley, this land, and the fierce guardians who protected it would define the man he was about to become. The intruders had fled, but the valley remained uneasy. Eli Whitlock, his heart still racing from the first battle, followed Ayita and Tayan down the ridge toward the lodge. The early morning fog clung to the ground, curling around roots and rocks, making the forest seem alive and watchful. Every step reminded Eli that the valley was more than land, it was a living force, and he was now part of it. Tayan moved silently beside them, the morning light glinting off his tribal jewelry and the sweat on his muscular torso. His presence was both reassuring and intimidating. The warrior's eyes scanned constantly, alert to every sound, every movement. Eli could feel the weight of history pressing down with every step. This was no ordinary inheritance. It was a legacy steeped in danger, loyalty, and the unspoken rules of the land. Ayita led them to the creek that ran behind the lodge. The water shimmered silver in the dawnlight, and Eli noticed something strange. Stones arranged in patterns beneath the shallow water, worn but deliberate, like markers for something hidden. Ayita knelt at the edge, tracing the patterns with her fingers. "Your uncle's secret isn't just in the lodge," she murmured. "It's in the valley itself. These markers lead to what he protected, what the intruders were searching for." Eli knelt beside her, studying the stones. "What exactly are we protecting?" he asked. "Gold? Land deeds? Something else?" Ayita shook her head, her dark eyes serious. "Something older, Eli. Something the valley itself treasures. Your uncle understood its value and danger. That's why he left it to you, and why. The Apache guardians like Tayan exist. What's hidden here could change everything for anyone greedy enough to take it." Tayan stepped closer, crouching low by the creek. He dipped his hand into the water, tracing the contours of the stones. A faint ripple of energy seemed to pulse through the water as he worked, and Eli felt a strange vibration under his feet, as though the valley recognized Tayan's touch. "These markers will only reveal themselves to those the valley trusts," Tayan said, his deep voice steady and commanding. "The greedy see only stones and water. We see the path." Eli's fingers brushed the cold water, and he felt it, an almost imperceptible hum running through the creek, through the valley, through him. His mark tingled, warm and insistent, urging him forward. I think I feel it," he admitted. "Something beneath the stones." Ayita's lips curved into a faint smile. "Good. You are learning. The valley tests us before it allows access. You have proven courage, and now it is showing you the way." As they followed the creek, the fog began to lift, revealing a narrow pathway hidden behind thick underbrush. The markers in the water aligned perfectly with stones along the path, guiding them toward a small, hidden cave nestled at the base of a ridge. Eli's pulse quickened. This must be where the legacy lay, and the intruders had no idea it existed. Tayan paused at the cave's entrance, lowering his bow. "Inside, the valley speaks for itself," he said. "Once we enter, Eli, you must. Be ready. The land has chosen you, but it will challenge you. Only those with respect, courage, and purpose may pass." Eli swallowed, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He glanced at Ayita, whose fierce eyes gave him reassurance, and then at Tayan, whose powerful presence radiated strength and certainty. Together, they were the guardians of the valley, and soon, Eli would fully understand the legacy he had inherited. The three stepped into the cave. The air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of earth and ancient stone. Stalactites dripped softly, echoing like distant footsteps. Eli's glowing mark seemed to pulse brighter in the darkness, guiding him forward. The walls of the cave, bore ancient carving symbols of protection, of warnings, of promises made centuries ago. Eli's breath caught as he realized the enormity of what lay ahead. This was no mere treasure. It was a secret of the valley itself, guarded by those willing to risk everything. And now it was his turn to prove himself worthy. Tay and gestured for silence, and Ayita placed her hand gently on Eli's arm. "Remember," she whispered, "the valley gives, but it also tests. Respect it, and it will guide you. Misstep, and it will strike without mercy." Eli nodded, feeling the pulse of the valley beneath his feet and the warmth of his mark along his arm. He was ready, or at least as ready as he could be. The hidden secret of Red River Valley awaited, and with Ayita and Tayan by his side, he would face whatever the land demanded. The cave opened into darkness ahead, promising mystery, danger, and the next step in a destiny far greater than he had ever imagined. The cave's darkness swallowed them as Eli, Ayita, and Tayan stepped inside. The faint glow of Eli's Apache mark pulsed against the stone walls, illuminating the ancient carvings that told stories older than the lodge, older than the settlers. Symbols of protection, unity, and warning traced across the rock reminded Eli of the weight of the legacy he now carried. "Stay close," Ayita whispered, her voice echoing softly against the stone. "The valley tests those who enter. Not all obstacles are seen. Not all dangers are physical." Eli tightened his grip on his revolver, though he sensed this was a test beyond mere weaponry. His mark tingled, warmth spreading up his arm, guiding him through the darkness. Tayan moved silently beside him, muscles taut, every sense alert. The Apache warrior was the embodiment of the valley's strength, an unspoken promise that they could face whatever lay ahead, as long as they honored the land and each other. A faint light appeared ahead, flickering as if breathing. Eli and Ayita exchanged a glance, both understanding that they were nearing the heart of the secret. The path narrowed, jagged rocks pressing close, dripping water echoing with every step. Eli could hear the distant rush of the creek above, but it was muted here, replaced by a sense of ancient presence. Then they emerged into a chamber bathed in a golden glow. The walls were lined with stones carved with intricate symbols, and in the center lay a small, ornate chest, partially covered by a thick layer of dust. Eli approached cautiously, feeling the pulse of his mark intensify. He could sense the importance of what lay before him, as if the valley itself had called him to this moment. This is it," Ayita breathed, her eyes wide. "The legacy your uncle protected." Tayan stepped forward, scanning the chamber. His bow rested on his shoulder, but his stance radiated vigilance. "Only those worthy may open it," he said. "The greedy, the unprepared, the disrespectful. They would be struck down long before reaching it." Eli took a deep breath. I'm ready," he said, feeling the warmth of his mark steady him. Slowly, he knelt and lifted the chest's lid. Inside, it wasn't gold or jewels that met his eyes. It was a collection of ancient documents, maps, and symbols. Among them lay a finely crafted dagger with a carved handle shaped like a falcon, a tool for protection and guidance rather than violence. Ayita stepped closer. "The valley protects knowledge," she said. "Power, wisdom, and history are more important than material wealth. Your uncle understood this, and now it is your responsibility." Eli nodded, the enormity of the moment settling upon him. He realized the lodge, the valley, and the Apache guardians were all connected by more than heritage. They were part of a living legacy, one that demanded respect, courage, and unity. A sudden rumble shook the chamber, making dust fall from the ceiling. Tayan's eyes narrowed, and he moved to the entrance. "The valley is aware of outsiders," he said. "They may come again. We must be ready." Eli glanced at Ayita and then Tayan. "Then we stay," he said firmly. "We protect it, together." The two nodded. Outside, the morning sun broke fully over Red River Valley, golden light spilling across the ridge, the lodge, and the creek. Below, the storm had passed, leaving the land vibrant, alive, and watchful. For the first time, Eli felt the true weight and the privilege of his inheritance. It was not just property, not just land. It was a living, breathing legacy, one that connected the past to the present and demanded guardianship for the future. Ayita rested a hand on his shoulder. "You have done well, Eli. You have proven courage and respect. The valley has accepted you. Remember, it will continue to guide and challenge you, but never abandon you as long as you honor it." Tayan lowered his bow, a rare smile flickering across his face. "You have strength. You have heart. The valley will thrive under your watch." Eli looked around the chamber one last time, feeling a deep sense of connection to the land, to the lodge, to the legacy his uncle had entrusted him with, and to the fierce, untamed spirits who now stood by his side. The valley was safe for now. But more importantly, Eli understood that he, Ayita, and Tayan were no longer mere inhabitants. They were guardians, bound to the land, to each other, and to the enduring spirit of Red River Valley. As the golden light bathed the chamber and spilled out into the valley, Eli Whitlock, once an ordinary inheritor, now stood fully marked, fully prepared, and fully alive, a protector of the land, the lodge, and the secrets of the valley that would shape generations to come. The adventure was over, but the legacy had just begun.